Hello, young people. This is Mr. Tolbert, Mr. Tolbert's biology class, and today we're going to talk about human pedigrees. When you hear this word pedigree, a lot of us think about dogs and cats and dog food in particular, but it's like that, but not exactly. Pedigrees is going to be something that's a step further than that. It's going to be how we analyze these traits, these things that make us us. Like if you got a big nose or small nose or dark hair or light hair, wavy hair, all of these little phenotypes, how you look, is what we're going to track using this pedigree and using that pedigree chart. The information gained from a pedigree analysis makes it possible to determine the nature of the genes and the alleles associated in human traits. And here it says human traits, but it's literally all of the traits. We use that in order to create from the wolf how we created all the different breeds of the dog that we have now. To analyze the pattern of an inheritance followed by a particular trait, you can use this chart. The chart itself is called a pedigree or a pedigree chart. It shows the relationships within a family. Pedigree shows the presence or the absence of a trait according to the relationships between the parents, siblings, and other kids or offspring. Now, this particular video, I'm not going to play it right now, but if you get a chance, the Amoeba Sisters pedigrees, it's a great little one. They explain it perfectly. It's a great one that you can use to help you understand it and how it works. Now, in the next slide, what you need to know is pedigrees in these charts, they look kind of funny, like X's and O's kind of a things, or squares and circles. And we have to know how to differentiate the parts, okay? Anytime you see a pedigree chart, these next two slides will help you figure out what it is that you're looking at. If you're looking at a square, the square is the male, the circle is the female. Anytime they're darkened in like this here, that means that trait is shown or they're infected. Anytime there's a connection between the square and the circle, that means there was mating. And then we use these Roman numerals here. These Roman numerals represent generation one and generation two, or offspring in generation one, offspring in generation two. Here you have a male and a female that get together and they have some offsprings. Offsprings are automatically second generation. And sometimes you'll see this little triangle-like one, and that's identical twins, or non-identical twins, in which case one's a boy, one's a girl, and one's a boy. You'll see that. But there are a lot of other symbols that you need to keep in mind. Let's look at this particular chart here. Now, I'm not going to have you write down all these, but it's important that you understand what they stand for. We've already talked about the square. We've already talked about if it's darkened in, if it's affected by other things. Now, in a pedigree chart, you can show a lot of different things. For instance, you can show, let's just say I give off a trait to my kids, or I carry a trait. I can mark it this way and says I am a carrier of that particular trait. Okay, or let's see what else here. A lot of times in pedigrees, they're basically the family trees, and in a family tree, you have to show that there was something born or something that was there, but maybe it died, or maybe the possibility of it was there. And that's what a couple of these other symbols over here, where we didn't know the sex of it, where it lived only a day, or stillbirth, or miscarriage. So looking at a pedigree chart, you can learn a lot of information. So this diagram shows the symbols of pedigree, at what they represent. In this particular one here, remember the circle is the female, the square is the male, and if it's shaded in, that means it has the trait or it's affected. Okay. Now we can look if they got together. This coupling yielded some stuff. It yielded several little children afterwards, and you can tell what they were based on if it's a circle or a square, or if it has the presence of that trait or allele. For instance, this here white lock of hair just above the forehead passes through three generations of family. This allele is a dominant trait for the male, so that's why in this particular one here, he's got that little stripe on his head, strizide, and he's affected. He gets together with a non-affected female, and they have some children. Their children in the second generation here, the first two kids have a male and a female and another female, and you can see here that this male is affected, this female is not affected, and this male female is not affected. looking like it's definitely a dominant trait. At the top of the chart, the grandfather who had the lock of hair, who was at the top, two of his three grandchildren inherited that trait. Three grandchildren have the trait, but two do not. So these are the two that do not. You can see they're not shaded in. Because it's dominant, all the family members in this particular pedigree, if it's in the genotype, it's going to show up if it's dominant. If it's recessive, you have to have a fully recessive complement in order to do that. Okay, so if it's fully recessive, you won't have that trait. Okay, and looking at the situation we have currently in front of us, it's showing us that grandpa must have been heterozygous for that trait because he has basically half and half. Heterozygous means hetero means different. So it's two different traits. They weren't the same. They weren't homozygous. So we use these pedigree and based on this to determine if that allele is going to be passed down, if it's dominant, recessive. There's a whole host of things we can learn from it. I hope you enjoyed today's little lesson, and that's why we use pedigree.